When Paul Walker walked into Premium Auto Services on a scorching afternoon in downtown Los Angeles, carrying nothing but his phone and wearing clothes covered in dust, the head mechanic took one look at him and decided he wasn't worth the effort. What started as casual mockery in front of the entire shop staff turned into a lesson about assumptions, dignity, and the true meaning of wealth that nobody in that garage would ever forget. Before we dive into this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you enjoy these powerful tales of unexpected encounters and life-changing moments, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow we have another remarkable story that will absolutely blow your mind. The afternoon heat was oppressive, the kind of Los Angeles summer day where the asphalt seemed to shimmer and breathing felt like inhaling from an oven. Premium Auto Services sat on a corner lot in a trendy part of downtown, the kind of neighborhood where the cheapest coffee cost $8 and everyone seemed to be either in entertainment or tech. The shop itself was impressive, gleaming with high-end equipment, luxury vehicles in various states of repair, and a waiting area that looked more like a boutique hotel lobby than an automotive garage. Tommy Rodriguez had built Premium Auto Services from nothing over 15 years. He'd started as a teenager changing oil at a quick lube place and had worked his way up through sheer determination, skill, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. By the time he was 35, he owned one of the most respected luxury automotive shops in Los Angeles. He specialized in high-end European vehicles, the kind of cars that cost more than most people's houses, and required mechanics who understood them like artists. Understood their medium. Tommy was proud of what he'd built, maybe too proud. Success had changed him in ways he didn't fully recognize. The struggling kid who'd once taken the bus to work because he couldn't afford a car had been replaced by a man who drove a Mercedes-AMG and wore custom-tailored work shirts with his name embroidered on them. He'd forgotten what it felt like to count change for lunch or worry about making rent, and that forgetting had made him less patient with people who reminded him of who he used to be. It was 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon when Paul Walker turned the corner and started walking toward Premium Auto Services. He'd been filming a charity documentary about homelessness in Los Angeles all day, spending hours talking to people living on the streets, hearing their stories, understanding their struggles. The work was emotionally exhausting but deeply meaningful, and Paul had insisted on dressing in a way that didn't create distance between him and the people he was interviewing. So he wore old jeans, a faded t-shirt, and work boots that had seen better days. His hair was windswept, his face was dusty from the streets, and he carried no visible signs of wealth or status. His car, a vintage Nissan Skyline that he'd been restoring personally for 2 years, had broken down about 3 miles away. Instead of calling for a tow truck, Paul had decided to walk to the nearest highly rated mechanic shop he could find on his phone. He wanted to talk to someone about the repairs in person, get a sense of the shop's quality, and maybe arrange to have the car brought in. Premium Auto Services had excellent reviews and specialized in the kind of precise work his Skyline needed. It seemed like the perfect choice. As Paul approached the open bay doors of the shop, he could hear the sounds of air tools, music playing from someone's speaker, and the casual conversation of mechanics at work. He stepped into the shade of the garage, grateful to be out of the direct sun, and looked around for someone to talk to. Tommy was standing near a lifted Porsche 911, pointing out something to his lead technician, Marcus, when he noticed the figure in the doorway. His first thought was confusion. This guy definitely wasn't a customer. Followed immediately by annoyance, probably someone looking for handouts or asking for directions. Tommy had dealt with plenty of people wandering in off the street, and he'd developed a quick dismissive routine that usually got rid of them without much fuss. "Can I help you?" Tommy called out, his tone making it clear he doubted there was anything he could or would want to do for this person. Paul walked further into the shop, smiling in a friendly way. "Hi, I'm hoping to talk to someone about getting my car repaired. It broke down a few miles from here." Tommy exchanged a glance with Marcus, and both men struggled not to laugh. "Your car broke down?" Tommy repeated, making no effort to hide his skepticism. "And where exactly is this car?" "About 3 miles east," Paul replied. "On 7th Street near the overpass. I was hoping to arrange a tow and talk about what kind of work it needs." Tommy crossed his arms, looking Paul up and down with obvious judgment. "So let me get this straight. Your car broke down 3 miles away, and instead of calling a tow truck like a normal person, you walked here, in this heat, looking like that?" Paul glanced down at his dusty clothes. "I know I'm not exactly dressed for a professional meeting, but I've been working on a project all day and didn't have time to change." My car needs help and your shop has excellent reviews." "Our shop," Tommy emphasized the word, "specializes in high-end European vehicles, Porsches, BMWs, Mercedes, Audis. We're not really set up to work on whatever beat or broke down on you." "It's actually a 1999 Nissan Skyline GTR, Paul said. "The R34 model. I've been restoring it personally, but the fuel system is giving me problems that I can't solve on my own." Marcus, who was a genuine car enthusiast beyond just being a mechanic, perked up at this. "An R34? Those are pretty rare in the States. How did you even get one?" Tommy shot Marcus a look that said don't encourage him, then turned back to Paul. "Look, man, even if you do have a Skyline, which I seriously doubt, we're booked solid for the next 3 weeks, and honestly, our rates probably aren't in your budget anyway." The condescension in Tommy's voice was impossible to miss. Paul's friendly expression faltered slightly. "You haven't even heard what I need or asked about my budget." "Don't need to," Tommy replied, his voice getting louder as a few other mechanics started paying attention to the conversation. "I can tell just by looking at you that you're not our usual clientele. Our minimum diagnostic fee is $250, labor runs $150 an hour, parts are premium priced because we only use OM or better. Most repairs that come through here cost at least $3,000, and that's for simple stuff." Paul nodded slowly. "Okay, that seems reasonable for quality work," Tommy laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Reasonable? Buddy, you walked here in this heat. You don't even have a car to drive. You're covered in dust, and you look like you've been sleeping under a bridge. I'm trying to be nice here, but you need to understand that this shop is for people who can actually afford premium automotive service." The statement hung in the air like a slap. Several mechanics had stopped working entirely now, watching the interaction with expressions ranging from discomfort to amusement. Paul stood very still, processing what was happening. "You're assuming I can't afford your services based on how I look right now?" "I'm not assuming anything," Tommy said, his confidence growing with his audience. "I'm making a professional assessment. People who can afford our rates show up in nice cars. They're dressed well. They act like they understand business. They don't wander in off the street looking like they just crawled out of a dumpster." Marcus looked uncomfortable now. "Tommy, maybe we should just..." "Should just what?" Tommy interrupted. "Waste our time with someone who obviously can't pay? I'm running a business here, Marcus, not a charity. I didn't build this place from nothing by being a soft touch for every random person who walks in with a sob story about their broken down car." Paul's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "I don't have a sob story. I have a car that needs repair, and I'm willing to pay your rates. I'm not asking for special treatment or charity. I'm asking to be treated like a potential customer. And I'm telling you that you're not our kind of customer," Tommy said flatly. "Look around, man. Look at the cars in here. That Porsche over there, worth $200,000. The BMW in Bay 3, $300,000 M8. The Audi getting its transmission rebuilt. Custom order from Germany, $500,000. These are the clients we serve. People with real money, people who take care of themselves and their possessions, not people who show up on foot covered in dirt." A younger mechanic named Danny, who'd only been working at the shop for 6 months, spoke up hesitantly. "Maybe we should at least hear him out about the car, if it really is an R34 Skyline." "It's not," Tommy cut him off, "because if this guy actually owned an R34, he'd be driving it or having it towed by a professional service, not hiking through downtown LA like some kind of homeless person." The word homeless seemed to echo through the garage. Paul closed his eyes briefly, taking a deep breath. When he opened them again, there was something different in his expression, a sadness mixed with determination. "I've been homeless," he said quietly. "Not recently, but I have been. I know what it's like to have nothing, to be judged by people who think they know everything about you based on how you look. I know what it's like to be treated as less than human because you don't meet someone's arbitrary standards of worth." Tommy rolled his eyes. "Great, a life story. Look, I'm sorry if you've had it rough, but that doesn't change the fact that this isn't the right shop for you. There are plenty of places that work on regular cars for regular prices. Try one of those." "Regular cars," Paul repeated. "You mean cars for people you consider beneath you?" "I mean cars that match their owners' budgets," Tommy said defensively. "I'm not being a snob. I'm being realistic. You can't afford us. It's that simple." Paul pulled out his phone, and Tommy actually laughed. "What are you going to do? Show me a picture of a car and claim it's yours? I've seen that scam before." "No," Paul said calmly. "I'm going to show you something else." He pulled up his banking app, navigated to one of his accounts, and held out the phone so Tommy could see the screen. Tommy glanced at it dismissively, then his eyes widened. He grabbed the phone from Paul's hand without asking permission, staring at the numbers on the screen. This is fake. This has to be photoshopped or something. It's not, Paul replied, and I'd like my phone back, please. Tommy handed it back slowly, his face pale. Marcus stepped closer. What was it? What did you see? The account balance, Tommy said, his voice barely above a whisper. It was over $50,000 in checking, just sitting there. Paul slipped his phone back into his pocket. That's one account. I have others, but the specific amount doesn't really matter, does it? The point is that you made an assumption about me based entirely on my appearance. You decided I was worthless, broke, beneath you and your precious shop, and you were wrong. Marcus looked at Tommy with disappointment. Man, what are you doing? This guy could have been a real customer. Could have been, Paul said, his voice sharp now. I am a real customer, or I was trying to be. I have a car that needs work. I have the money to pay for it. I was prepared to pay your rates without question, but none of that mattered to you because I didn't look the way you thought a wealthy person should look. Tommy's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. How was I supposed to know? You show up looking like that, walking instead of driving, with no indication that you're anything other than what? Paul interrupted. Other than human? Other than someone deserving of basic respect? You keep starting to say it, Tommy. Go ahead. Finish the thought. Tell me what you really think people like me, people who don't meet your visual standards of success. Tell me what we are. The challenge hung in the air. Tommy's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He'd been caught in his own prejudice, exposed in front of his entire staff, and he didn't know how to recover. Danny, the young mechanic, stepped forward. Sir, I apologize for how you've been treated. If you'd like to tell me about your car, I'd be happy to help arrange a tow and schedule the work. Paul looked at Danny with appreciation. Thank you. I appreciate that more than you know, but I don't think I can bring my car here now. Not because of you, but because I can't support a business that treats people this way. Wait, Tommy said, finally finding his voice again. Look, maybe I was too quick to judge. Maybe we can start over. Paul shook his head. Start over? You publicly humiliated me. You made assumptions about my worth as a human being based on my clothes and the fact that I walked here. You were cruel, dismissive, and disrespectful. And the only reason you're reconsidering now is because I showed you a bank balance. If I hadn't done that, you'd still be trying to push me out the door. That's not fair, Tommy protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Paul asked. Tell me, Tommy, if I'd walked out of here without showing you that account, what would you have said to your guys once I was gone? Would you have made jokes about me? Laughed about the homeless-looking guy who thought he could afford your shop? Used me as an example of the kind of time-waster you have to deal with? Tommy's silence was answer enough. Marcus turned away, shaking his head. Danny looked at the floor. Paul looked around at the assembled mechanics, seeing varying degrees of discomfort, shame, and in a few cases, defensive anger on their faces. I want all of you to understand something, he said, his voice carrying through the garage. Wealth isn't visible. Character isn't displayed on clothing tags. Worth isn't determined by how someone arrives at your door. Some of the richest people I know dress like they're going to clean out their garage. And some of the poorest people I've met have more dignity and grace than anyone in this shop has shown me today. Tommy's jaw clenched. Okay, I get it. I messed up. But you're being pretty self-righteous for someone who deliberately dressed down and then got offended when people reacted to it. Deliberately dressed down? Paul repeated, his voice rising for the first time. I was working. I was spending my day talking to people experiencing homelessness, trying to understand their stories so I could help raise awareness and funds for organizations that support them. I didn't dress this way to test you or trick you. I dressed this way because I was doing work that mattered. Work that's more important than anything happening in this garage. And I walked here because I believe in understanding the city I live in, the neighborhoods I move through. I walked here because sometimes experiencing small inconveniences reminds me of how privileged I am, but none of that should matter. Even if I had dressed this way for no reason at all, even if I actually was homeless, I still deserved basic human respect. Marcus spoke up, his voice thoughtful. He's right, Tommy. And you know what? You used to understand that. Remember when you first opened this place? You told me that you'd never forget what it was like to be the guy everyone underestimated, the guy people judged. You said you'd built this business to prove them all wrong. That was different, Tommy muttered. How? Marcus challenged. How was it different? Because now you're the one doing the judging? Now you're the one deciding who's worthy of your time based on appearances? Tommy looked at his friend and business partner, and something in his expression shifted. The defensive anger started to crack, revealing the shame underneath. "I worked so hard to get away from being that person," he said quietly. "The broke kid from the bad neighborhood who nobody took seriously. I built all this to prove I was more than what people assumed, and somewhere along the way I started assuming the same things about other people." "That's exactly what happened," Paul agreed, his voice gentler now. "You forgot where you came from. You forgot what it felt like to be dismissed and disrespected, and you started doing to others what was done to you." Tommy looked at Paul, really looked at him for the first time since he'd walked into the shop. "I don't even know who you are. I spent all this time making assumptions, but I never asked your name." "Paul," he replied simply. "Paul Walker." The name clearly meant something to several of the mechanics. Danny's eyes widened, Marcus's mouth fell open. Even Tommy looked stunned. "Paul Walker? The actor? From Fast and Furious?" "Among other things, yes," Paul confirmed. Tommy put his head in his hands. "Oh my God, I just told Paul Walker, a guy who's probably forgotten more about cars than I'll ever know, that he couldn't afford my shop. I told one of the most famous car enthusiasts in the world that he probably drives a beater." "The irony is pretty thick," Marcus muttered, but Paul shook his head. "That's not the point. The point isn't that I'm famous or that I'm in movies about cars. The point is that I'm a human being who came here needing help, and I was treated terribly. It wouldn't matter if I was an actor or a teacher or a construction worker or actually homeless. The treatment would have been wrong regardless of who I am." Danny stepped forward again. "Mr. Walker, I've seen all your movies. I became a mechanic partly because of how much I love the car culture in those films. And I'm ashamed to have been part of what happened here today. Even if I didn't say anything, I should have spoken up earlier." "You spoke up when it counted," Paul said kindly. "That takes courage." Tommy took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "You're right about everything. About all of it. I became exactly the kind of person I used to hate, the kind of person who judged me when I was starting out, when I was poor, when I was struggling." He looked around the shop at the expensive equipment and luxury vehicles. "I built all this as proof that I'd made it, that I was somebody, but I turned into somebody I don't even like." Paul watched Tommy grapple with this realization, seeing genuine remorse replacing the defensive pride. "Tommy, can I tell you something? Success isn't measured by what you have. It's measured by how you treat people, especially people who can't do anything. For you, your shop is impressive. Your skills are clearly excellent, but none of that means anything if you've lost your humanity along the way." "How do I fix this?" Tommy asked. And the question seemed to encompass more than just this afternoon's incident. "You start by remembering," Paul said. "Remember what it felt like to be dismissed, to be judged, to be treated as less than, and then you make a choice to never make anyone else feel that way, not because of who they might turn out to be, but because of who you want to be." Marcus spoke up. "Tommy, remember that kid who came in last month? The one with the beat-up Honda who was trying to scrape together enough money to fix his transmission? You told him we were too busy. You basically sent him away without even looking at his car." Tommy winced. "I remember. What if he was another Paul Walker?" Marcus continued. "What if he was someone who could have afforded our services but just looked young and broke? Would it have mattered?" "It shouldn't have mattered either way," Tommy admitted. "I should have helped him because that's what mechanics do. We help people with their cars. That's the job. That's supposed to be the purpose." Paul pulled out his phone again. "Tommy, I'm going to show you something else, not to make you feel worse, but because I think you need to see it." He pulled up a photo from earlier in the day, an image of him sitting on a curb talking to an elderly homeless man named Robert. This man's name is Robert. He's 72 years old. He was a mechanic for 40 years before a series of bad breaks and worse luck left him on the streets. He told me today that the hardest part about being homeless isn't the hunger or the cold or even the danger. It's the invisibility. It's having people look right through you as if you don't exist, as if you're not human anymore. Tommy stared at the photo, his eyes welling up. "Robert said something that stuck with me," Paul continued. "He said that he can always tell the quality of a person's character by how they treat him. Because when you have nothing, when you can offer nothing in return, that's when people's true nature comes out. Some people see you and offer kindness anyway. Others look right through you as if you're not there." "I would have looked through him," Tommy whispered. "If he'd walked in here today, I would have kicked him out even faster than I tried to kick you out." "Probably," Paul agreed, not sugarcoating it. "But now you know better. Now you have a choice about who you're going to be going forward." Marcus walked over to Tommy and put a hand on his shoulder. "Man, you gave me a job when nobody else would. You knew I had a record. You knew other shops had turned me down. But you took a chance on me because you said everybody deserves a second chance. Remember that guy? That's the Tommy I want to work for." Tommy wiped his eyes roughly. "I'm sorry," he said to Paul. "I'm genuinely, deeply sorry, not just for today, but for every other person I've probably treated this way over the past few years. People I don't even remember because I dismiss them so quickly." "Apology accepted," Paul said. "But apologies mean nothing without changed behavior. The question is, what are you going to do differently starting now?" Tommy thought for a moment, looking around his shop with new eyes. "I'm going to fix this place. Not the equipment or the building, but the culture, the attitude, the way we treat people." He turned to his staff. "From now on, every single person who walks through that door gets treated with respect. I don't care how they're dressed. I don't care how they arrived. I don't care if they're driving a Ferrari or they walked here from across town. Everyone gets the same courtesy and professionalism." Danny nodded enthusiastically. Marcus smiled. The other mechanics exchanged glances, some looking relieved and others still processing. "More than that," Tommy continued, his voice gaining strength, "I want to start a program. One day a month we offer free diagnostics and discounted labor to people who are struggling, single parents, people who lost their jobs, anyone who needs help but can't afford premium rates. We still do our high-end work, but we also remember what it's like to need help and not be able to afford it." Paul smiled, genuinely impressed. "Now that's the kind of change that matters. Will you let me make it up to you?" Tommy asked. "Your Skyline. Let me tow it here, do the work personally, and I won't charge you a cent." But Paul shook his head. "That's not necessary, Tommy. I'll pay your full rates, but I will let you work on my car if the offer's genuine and not just about making yourself feel better." "It's genuine," Tommy assured him, "and it's not about feeling better, though I hope someday I can forgive myself for today. It's about doing the right thing." Finally, again, whatever word applies, Paul extended his hand, and Tommy shook it firmly. "Then let's talk about my fuel system issues." Over the next hour, Tommy and Paul discussed the Skyline's problems in detail. Tommy's expertise became evident as he asked precise questions and offered insights that Paul hadn't considered. The other mechanics gradually returned to their work, but the atmosphere in the shop had changed. There was less swagger, less casual arrogance, more thoughtfulness. When Paul's car was finally towed and 2 hours later, several mechanics stopped what they were doing to admire it. The R34 Skyline was indeed real, and it was a beautiful example of the model, clearly loved and meticulously maintained despite its current issues. "This is incredible work," Tommy said, examining the engine bay. "You did most of this restoration yourself?" "All of it," Paul confirmed. "It's been a labor of love for 2 years. This fuel issue is the first problem I haven't been able to solve on my own." Tommy smiled, a genuine expression without the earlier condescension. "I can see why you love this car. It's not about the money or the status. It's about the connection to the machine, the process of bringing something back to life. That's what got me into this business in the first place, before I forgot and turned it into just about profit." As Tommy and Marcus worked on diagnosing the fuel system, Danny approached Paul hesitantly. "Mr. Walker, can I ask you something?" "Of course, and please just call me Paul." "How did you stay so calm?" Danny asked. "When Tommy was saying all those things, being so disrespectful, you barely raised your voice. I would have lost it." Paul considered the question carefully. "Anger doesn't usually solve anything, and honestly, I felt sorry for Tommy more than angry at him. I could see that he was trapped in his own success, that he'd lost touch with something important. Yelling at him wouldn't have helped him see that. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is hold up a mirror calmly enough that someone can actually see their reflection instead of just their defenses." "That's wise," Danny said. "I want to be like that, patient, understanding." "It takes practice," Paul admitted, "and I'm not always successful at it, but I try to remember that everyone's fighting battles I don't know about, even people who are cruel or dismissive. They're usually in pain themselves." Danny nodded thoughtfully and returned to his work. Throughout the afternoon, Paul noticed small changes in how the mechanics interacted with each other and with customers who called or stopped by. There was more courtesy, more patience, less casual judgment around 6 p.m. Tommy wiped his hands on a rag and approached Paul with the diagnosis. "Found your problem. The fuel pressure regulator is failing, and there's some debris in the lines that's causing inconsistent flow. I can have the parts overnight and have you fixed up by tomorrow afternoon." "That fast?" Paul asked. "For you? I'll make it happen." Tommy paused. "And Paul, thank you." "For what?" "For walking into my shop today, for not leaving when I was terrible to you, for teaching me something I desperately needed to learn. My uncle, the one who first taught me about cars, he used to say that the best teachers come when you're not expecting them and teach you things you didn't know you needed to learn. That was you today." Paul smiled. "Your uncle sounds like he was a wise man." "He was, and he would have been ashamed of how I've been running this place, how I've been treating people. But I think, maybe, if he could see what happens next, how I'm going to change things, maybe he'd be proud again." "I think he would be," Paul agreed. The next day, Paul returned to pick up his Skyline. The repair had been completed expertly, and when Tommy presented the bill, Paul noted that it was fair, professional, and considerably less than Tommy had threatened it would be the day before. "You're giving me a discount," Paul observed. "I'm giving you a fair price," Tommy corrected. "The numbers I threw at you yesterday, those were inflated. I was trying to scare you off. These are my actual rates." "Still, premium, but honest," Paul paid without hesitation, adding a generous tip for the mechanics who'd worked on his car. As he prepared to leave, Tommy walked him out to where the Skyline sat gleaming in the afternoon sun. "I implemented that program I mentioned," Tommy said. "The first Saturday of every month, we're offering free diagnostics and discounted services to people who need help. Marcus's cousin, who works with a nonprofit that helps families in transition, is going to help us identify people who could benefit." "That's wonderful, Tommy, really?" "It's a start," Tommy replied. "A start to being the kind of business I should have been all along, the kind my uncle would have wanted me to run." He hesitated, then continued. "Can I ask you something? Why do you do it? The charity work, the advocacy, all the stuff that you don't have to do. You're successful, you're famous. You could just enjoy your life." Paul leaned against his car, considering the question. "Because success without purpose is just accumulation. Money without meaning is just paper. Fame without using it for good is just noise. I was given opportunities that millions of people never get. The only way that makes sense, the only way I can live with that inequality, is by doing everything I can to help others get opportunities too." "That's beautiful," Tommy said quietly. "It's necessary," Paul corrected. "At least for me. I don't sleep well if I haven't tried to make someone's life better that day, even in small ways. Especially in small ways, actually, because those tend to be the most real." As Paul started his engine, reveling in the smooth purr that indicated Tommy's excellent work, he rolled down the window. "Tommy, one more thing. Don't beat yourself up forever about yesterday. You made a mistake. You recognized it. You're fixing it. That's the whole arc of growth right there. Just make sure you keep remembering. Keep that feeling close, because the moment you forget again is the moment you risk becoming that person again." "I won't forget," Tommy promised. "How could I? The day Paul Walker walked into my shop on foot, and I didn't even recognize him because I was too busy being a judgmental ass. That's a story that's going to follow me forever," Paul laughed. "Maybe that story will help someone else someday. Maybe when you're tempted to judge someone by their appearance, you'll remember and choose differently." "I will," Tommy said firmly. "I absolutely will." As Paul drove away in his perfectly running Skyline, he looked in his rearview mirror and saw Tommy standing in front of Premium Auto Services watching him leave. The man looked different somehow, smaller in a good way, less puffed up with pride and more grounded in purpose. Paul hoped the change would stick. He believed it would. 3 months later, Paul was driving through the same neighborhood and decided to stop by Premium Auto Services to see how things were going. What he found surprised and delighted him. The shop was busy as before, but the atmosphere was completely different. A young woman was having her Volkswagen's brakes inspected, and Tommy was explaining the work needed with patience and clarity, never talking down to her. An elderly man was getting his oil changed, and Danny was chatting with him about his grandchildren while he worked. In the waiting area, a single father sat with his 2 kids, and Marcus brought them bottles of water and some coloring books he kept on hand now for young visitors. Tommy spotted Paul and his face lit up. "Paul, come to check up on us?" "Just happened to be in the neighborhood," Paul replied, with a smile. "Place looks good, feels good." "It is good," Tommy said. "Better than it's ever been, actually. You know what's funny? I thought treating people with respect, regardless of their ability to pay, would hurt business. I thought the high-end clients would leave if they saw us working on regular cars for regular people. But the opposite happened. We're busier than ever. Turns out people like supporting businesses that have values beyond just profit. Imagine that, Paul said with mock surprise, and Tommy laughed. Yeah, you tried to tell me that first Saturday program? We had 12 cars the first month. This month we had 37. Word spread fast. And some of those people, once they got back on their feet, they came back as regular paying customers. They told their friends, "It's been incredible." Paul walked through the shop, noticing the small changes: a bulletin board with thank you cards from grateful customers, a corner with a coffee maker and comfortable chairs, a sign that read, "Everyone welcome, everyone respected, no exceptions." "That's my daily reminder," Tommy said, noticing Paul's gaze on the sign. "Marcus made it for me. Every morning when I come in, I read it, and I remember what kind of business I want to run, what kind of person I want to be. Your uncle would be proud," Paul said. Tommy's eyes misted over. "I think he would be, finally. And you know what? I'm proud too, not of the shop or the equipment or the profit margins. I'm proud of the guy I see in the mirror now, the one who looks a little more like the kid who started this journey and a lot less like the jerk who forgot where he came from." As Paul prepared to leave, a man in ragged clothes carrying all his belongings in a backpack hesitantly approached the shop entrance. He stood there for a moment, clearly uncertain, then started to turn away. "Hey!" Tommy called out, walking over quickly. "Can I help you with something?" The man looked startled, then defensive. "I don't want any trouble. I was just hoping there might be some water. It's really hot out here." "Of course," Tommy said warmly. "Come on in where it's cool. We've got cold water, and I think Marcus made sandwiches if you're hungry." The man looked shocked. "Really? You don't want me to leave?" "Why would I want you to leave?" Tommy asked, genuinely confused. Then understanding dawned on his face. "Oh, because of how you look, because of your situation?" "No, man, that doesn't matter here. Come in, cool off, have something to eat." Paul watched this interaction with deep satisfaction. Tommy caught his eye and smiled, a little embarrassed, but mostly proud. This was the real transformation, not the program or the sign or the changed policies. This moment, this choice to see a person and treat them with dignity regardless of circumstances. As Paul drove away for the second time, he reflected on one of life's most important truths. People can change. Sometimes it takes confrontation. Sometimes it takes embarrassment. Sometimes it takes having your assumptions shattered in the most uncomfortable way possible. But people can change, and when they do, when they choose to become better versions of themselves, they create ripples that spread far beyond what they can see. Tommy Rodriguez had been transformed from a successful but bitter mechanic into a successful and compassionate businessman, all because he'd judged someone by their appearance and been proven spectacularly wrong. That painful lesson had become the catalyst for something beautiful. A shop that fixed cars, yes, but also helped restore people's dignity. A business that made profit, yes, but also made a difference, and somewhere in heaven or wherever the spirits of wise uncles reside, Tommy's uncle was smiling because the boy he'd taught about engines and integrity had finally remembered the most important lesson of all, that how you treat people, especially people who can do nothing for you, is the only measure of success that truly matters. Everything else is just noise.